This week, we're talking about dystopian futures and what's coming for us in this insane future here on Earth. We'll also be talking about Crew 1 and Starship's SNH launch later this week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Today in Space. I am your space podcast host from the East Coast, Alex Girofanos, and I hope you're well. I hope you're hanging in there. I've had a lot of thoughts of dystopian futures, and even when I had COVID about a month ago, I had a lot of time to just sit there and think and exist. Dystopian futures and things like that, and how they relate to today. And the crux of this show is the kind of hope, the Hail Marys that the space industry is going to offer to those dystopian futures to either sway them away from that path or could obviously potentially bring us closer to that. So we'll be talking about that today because that's the kind of place I've been in lately. Like I said, welcome to the show. If you're new, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, give us a like and hit that bell. And after you subscribe, so you can stay up to date. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us there. Follow, share with friends. You guys sharing it with other people has been the thing that's broken us through the algorithm and shown us to more people. So we thank you for that. So keep that up. Thank you. It really does helping us in our mission to spread love and spread science. So let's talk about it. So I hinted last episode after talking about COVID, just real quick about that. I'm obviously doing much better. I'm out of isolation, and it's even better than when I recorded the last episode. But even so, I'm still not. My lung capacity still isn't back, so I'm still dealing with that and congestion. You might even be able to hear it. I'm not even sure. But yeah, it's still lingering, just lingering. It's crazy. But we're doing what I can to do it. Drink as much water as I can as possible. Just put my body in a place to recover. That's what I'm trying to do. So even some of these podcasts, we're not quite up to 100%, but we're getting there. We're doing what we can. Let's see. So hinted at it last episode. What the Halloween costume is going to be Star Trek related, because obviously Star Trek is everything, and we've been doing a lot of that on our Instagram page at Today in Space Pod. We've even had Thrifty Thursdays with Quark from DS9. But if you haven't already, head over to Today in Space Pod. Go check out our costumes in full effect. It was me and Sarah. She was 7 of 9, and I was Hugh, or Locutus, really. This is Locutus's arm. Picard, that ended up getting turned and assimilated by the Borg. So this was pretty sweet, right? I mean, this looks awesome. The model is amazing, thanks to the artist that made that. We'll have that link in this week's episode, so you can check that out. If you have a 3D printer, you can make this yourself, too. We're going to have a video on AG 3D printing showing how we made this and how we 3D printed this and stuff like that. We've been watching Star Trek, and a lot of our lives have been taken up by that because that's all we literally could do with COVID, right? We sit on the couch and watch TV. So we went deep into that. And it's also kind of a reflection of how I feel. Everything is crazy right now. Do you guys feel like that? I mean, I'm barely getting my words out as it is. It's a crazy time. I feel like the age of trying to reason with somebody is not now, and I hope things will change in the near future, but it's definitely felt like we've all gone mad, and something like the Borg, an entire species assimilating the human species, would probably be easier now than ever before. And that's where the dystopian future stuff comes in. It's interesting. When things go bad, they go real bad, and the world has taken a slide in many different ways. Obviously, with COVID and the way that's changed everything, and how that's going to show what the future could hold. I mean, this has shown that something like a COVID-19 outbreak, a pandemic, can change the way that the world operates. I mean, so many people. I mean, I got let go at the place I was working at because of COVID cuts. And I'm sure there's a lot of different people. I luckily bounced back. I found another job at another company, and that's great. Especially during this time, it's amazing. But there's a lot of people who still don't have jobs and are still trying to find their way. There's not a lot of aid coming. So how can I not think of dystopian futures here? We're essentially living through one right now. And I think a lot of this is just that no one was ready for it. It'll better prepare us for the future, but you have to wonder if you think about, and this is where my mind goes, so apologies if this is really dark, but this is just where I've been at. I look to the future and see, okay, anyone that would want to do harm to the world or cause chaos and change, seeing the effect of what COVID has done to change the whole outline of our environment and shift things in such a crazy way, we need to be really vigilant about being proactive for this stuff. The reason we got hit so hard, I believe, with COVID is that nobody had a plan. And even still, it's really difficult. I'm very lucky that I have a partner like Sarah who we can think about this and work together on a plan and bounce ideas back and forth. We're both scientifically minded, so we're both used to, hey, what's the best idea? We'll take these ideas, try these, test them out, and figure out what happens, right? Not everyone has that kind of teamwork. Not everyone has that kind of structure in their life. Never mind, we're scientists, but we just know the kind of people to ask and how to read scientific research and filter it out. That's definitely a good skill to have in today's world where you basically have to look at everything, right? And one of the things that makes things a lot easier is having a habit, right? It's not so much of like, hey, you gotta wear your mask. Wearing the mask helps, but it's about it's not about a singular thing or just a visual thing. It's about constantly being open to the fact that our information about this COVID-19, whatever it is going to change, which means you have to be open-minded to different ways of solving the problem and approaching the problem differently, even rethinking the problem. So having a good habit in place that covers your basis and then slowly taking away things that maybe don't matter anymore or aren't as important and then replacing them with better things, constantly adapting, that to me is something that just has not been communicated well from the people that are doing the frontline research with dealing with COVID and dealing with these diseases. That information is not being disseminated to the public so that they can make their own decisions or even guidelines on how to do it. We're not ready for this. So that's my whole thing on COVID. Again, if you want to learn more about what I went through, what my symptoms were, in case you don't know anyone that's had COVID or you just want an anecdotal, hey, here's my personal experience, that was last episode. So go check that out. The other thing that's been kind of crazy is how, we always thought, oh, how could technology enter our lives? There were still people that didn't use enough technology and were really like, they could take their time adopting tech and things like social media and YouTube and videos and streaming. And something like this with COVID, it has jacked up our acceleration in the adoption of technology and the internet and interfacing digitally in our lives, right? The digital and the real world have now crossed over at such a crazy pace that I don't think there's a going back. And just to give you, this is where my mindset is, and this is what kind of guides my thinking towards the future of what are the things we need to help explain and people I should go talk to go share their ideas and so people to have on the podcast and things to think about for the future. With that adoption of that technology, the algorithms that make up the internet, that put stuff out there, that show us the information, right? It's a great thing that it can do that it can know enough to say, hey, let's provide you something that you're interested in, right? That's amazing that they can do that, disseminate all the information on the internet and simply give it to you. They're really dumb algorithms, though. They're not based on necessarily having you have a better life or even making you a better person because now that you have that information, you're smart. It's not even about that, right? It's really just about how can we get your attention. And I heard an interview with the creator of The Social Dilemma. I still have to watch on Netflix. But if you've seen that, I'd love to know what you thought about that. Did that scare you? Did that change your thoughts about how things are done? This kind of thing has been on my mind for a really long time. And of course, being online and sharing my thoughts, it also gets a little weird. I know personally, since I've been learning even more about that stuff, and recently, I've definitely had to take time away. Like I've pulled back. You guys probably noticed over the last, this year and kind of 2019 too. I was really pushing online and doing a lot of posts and doing the things I needed to do to build towards the algorithm and just have a good discipline with it. Right? It worked great. But there's also things like hey, there are times when I just got to take a rest. Like that's just how it is, and it's finding that balance, right? So I'm in this different state now, still recovering from COVID, and also other stuff that I was already, PT stuff mentioned before. I have scoliosis, so I'm building myself up really from the groundwork as far as physically to make sure my muscles are strong enough, and it's a completely different balance. And I had to be okay with that to just finally say, hey, this is not the same as it was 6 months ago, which is the case for all of us, right? A year ago, our lives were in a completely different place than they were today. The whole landscape of the world has changed because of what we can and can't do, and people either not having a job, not enough money in the economy, whatever it is. We have to be very good at adapting to that craziness, and there's a lot more crazy coming. I mean, that's without a doubt. But let's move on from the dystopian stuff and talk about some things with space that are exciting that are coming up here. So obviously, one of the cool things, we've been talking about Starlink for a while. SpaceX has been launching them about 60 at a time, 58 at a time, into constellation orbits. People have been seeing the trains of the Starlink satellites as they get deployed after they're launched, and it's really cool. There's obviously some stuff behind it of, is it good, is it bad? The beta program and the information behind that for beta users to buy the hardware and use the internet already is already happening, which is crazy. So I have some info on how much that costs. Basically, the hardware itself is $499 and $499, and then the service itself is $99 a month. So basically, you're buying the dish and all the hardware that gets you the internet itself, and then you're just paying for that service. And right now, since there's not a lot of people, there's a crazy speed and download and upload abilities, which is great because there's like barely anyone on there. How that gets affected as there's more people using the service, we'll see. Who knows? But with all those different satellites in the constellation, I'd be interested to see how they adapt to, say, different types of demands on the planet, right? If this sector here of, we'll just say 8 constellation Starlinks, can they expand that to a wider range and help compensate for the feed so that your download and upload speeds stay really high? I don't know what they're able to do, but or if they're able to do different kind of maneuvers during certain parts of the day, right? They see the trend of how people are using the internet and the bandwidth, and they could actually change the constellation potentially. This is just all hearsay. This is just where my mind goes visually in my head of what's the possibility. They could do different orientations to provide different types of internet. I don't know. There's a lot of potential there, and it's crazy. But I was even myself thinking about getting into the beta program. But it's interesting. $499 for the hardware, so that's the one-time fee, and then $100 a month. So yeah, it's a little outside of what most people are paying. But if you want to go purely internet and go purely Starlink, that's not bad for, if you're going to do all your internet and your communications and cable and stuff like that. If you're just going to use services, that's a very interesting price point for people who are cutting the cord and stuff like that. That's not bad. I mean, $100 for internet and basically everything else that you would get, like that's pretty good. You just got to cough up that $500 up front. So, interesting for sure. Crew 1 is already getting installed and prepped for the November 14th launch down in Florida. The astronauts Victor Glover, Michael Hopkins, and Shannon Walker from NASA, along with Soichi Noguchi, the astronaut from Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. And this is part of the whole commercial crew progress, getting American astronauts launched from American soil aboard American spacecraft. This is the SpaceX Crew Dragon. So obviously we had the Demo 2 mission, which we did a live stream for. We're going to try and do another live stream next Saturday on the 14th for Crew 1. And this is the first operational mission for NASA's astronauts. So that's a huge step forward for everything commercial crew, everything U.S. space flight, U.S. human space flight, and everything in preparation for Artemis. Getting the first woman and next man to the moon, to the surface of the moon, but also setting up this infrastructure like the International Space Station, which allows us to go into space continuously. The ISS just had its 20-year anniversary of having humans on board consistently for 20 years, almost my entire life. That's due to the international partnership that we've had in place that is, thank goodness, still in place after everything that's happened in the last 8 to 16 years with the unknown of what NASA's going to do in space and what our next steps were. It sets up these two paths for us to go down to, kind of the crux of this episode, right? Of these two paths of space, of what these could do for humanity that's good for space, that's also good for humankind. So you've got the first base, which is around the moon, and that is going to include NASA, the ESA, Russia, China, JAXA, and all these other space agencies from around the world that are going to work together. The partnerships are already getting signed. There was an accord that was just reached, and this is going to be setting up the groundwork for going to the moon and setting up human presence. Now, that's the private sector combining as well, right? NASA using every resource it can. So there's all this action happening around the moon that allows us to work very, very quickly on developing a stable society that works in space, which builds the foundation for a space economy, right? But that is a very, as audacious as that is, and as hard as it's going to be to do it right, it's a pretty conservative approach to space development. And that's not a bad thing. I think, when I say conservative, I mean that it's going to be done in steps that are achievable over a longer period of time than you would than what you're seeing in the expansion of space today. And that is due to the fact that it has to be stable. It has to be safe. If we're going back to the moon to stay, the big thing is it's got to be something that's done routinely and be as rigid safety-wise as you would expect an airline, right? When you're flying around the country, around the world, there's a reliability, as terrifying as it might be to be in that plane, there is a reliability and a level of engineering done to make sure that there are redundancies so that you can survive if a mistake happens, right? So when that happens, a space economy can be built that doesn't hang in the balance of one mission not going well and destroying the ability or the confidence that anyone could have in that space economy. Because if people can't have confidence in any kind of economy, they don't invest, right? So this is a really important step towards the next stages of where humanity goes through the stars. Now, the crazy other option here is that SpaceX is also working on the moon, but also looking at Mars at the same time. And so one of the things, we talked about this before, SpaceX is trying to make human life interplanetary. And obviously, one of the hedges against the future for mankind, for humankind, is that Elon is trying to make sure we have two separate places so that, if an asteroid happens or something like that, or whatever, we have a massive greenhouse effect on one of the planets, we've still got a place where we can be. They have always had this goal to building the city on Mars. Elon has even talked about, once he's able to go to Mars, he's plans on, living out his days there. And Starship is really this multifaceted Hail Mary of technology and engineering that could really make a crazy scenario happen. So Starship, their plan is sometime in the 2020s. We're already there. We're already at the start of that. SpaceX hopes to get Starship to actually land on Mars, which is crazy. And then by 2050, they're actually really planning to have a city on Mars and have its own laws. Now, that might seem outrageous. That might seem like, wow, that billionaire is really nuts. He thinks he's going to start some other country on another planet and have his own laws. And yes, is there a lot of legal steps that they have to go through? Sure. But one of the interesting things I've learned about law is that it's kind of all based on precedent, right? As soon as something happens to set a new precedent, then new laws can be made around that. Space law is very, very young. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 is really like the core to dictate what happens, right, when you're out in space. Who is responsible for what? Are you able to claim land or not? Things like that, which, of course, making your own country and your own laws, a lot of that is wrapped up in. There was an adjustment during the Obama administration years that changed the law slightly to basically incorporate the idea of mining in space in general, right? Because one of the missions during the Obama administration was to recover an asteroid in near-Earth orbit and then send actual astronauts there to be on the surface, to mine whatever they needed to do, and then come back. and put it in an orbit that you could just keep it out there and constantly be sending people out there. The law changed so that the country that the mission launches from is responsible in all regards, good or bad, for the mission. So that's the resources that come back, that's whatever they do out there. So right now, the way the law is written is that basically if SpaceX launches from Florida, then Florida, and in that case, the US, is in charge of whatever they do when they go there. So if Elon sends a mission to Mars and they start making the city with their own laws, and because they're potentially the only people over there, then they can just say, hey, we don't care what you think. We're over here. You're over there. We have our own laws. A very interesting thing that Elon is looking for, and they're writing a constitution for Mars. And they're very serious about this. So they're actually working on it, and they're going to have a democracy, a pure democracy, that there will only be so many people. They're not going to have a representative democracy like we have here in the U.S., where the representatives vote. This would be a direct democracy where every single citizen is expected to vote on every single issue. And I think it obviously, to me, makes more sense with how little people will be there. I mean, that's kind of desert island scenario, right? How a nice not killing each other scenario happens, right? Where everyone kind of has a vote and we're able to decide what's the best for everybody. Everyone gets a say. There's not just like one dictator or anything like that. And if you're able to have your own society and start from complete scratch in today's age, what would you do with that society? What rules would you put in place to do that? And here, in a matter of basically 10 to 15 years, you could easily expect, if seeing that everything with Starship goes well, Starship could bring people to Mars, and there could already be a constitution in place, and people could go to that place and live their lives under their own society and build it from scratch, something we don't have the opportunity to do here on Earth. It just seems way too difficult. And you get so many people on board in order to make such giant change in society here. Could that SpaceX colony diverge into some dystopian Martian nightmare, which you kind of see in all the space sci-fi that's out there, kind of around Mars and Earth relations? I don't really see that much bad in a company being able to do that. I mean, how is it any different than what the colonists did to start America here? I mean, how is that any different, right? I think it's an experiment we should let play out. I think it's awesome. And I wish them all the luck. And so we've got all these exciting things, right? All these things that are building up to that potential future in the next few decades. We've got Starship SN8 launching, doing the 15-kilometer hop sometime over the next few days. They're ready. They're just going to take the steps to get Starship on the mount, ready for its hop. And then we're going to see a potential belly flop back to land back on the surface after 15 kilometers. I mean, crazy. It's going to be absolutely crazy. So I'm looking forward to that. We will do our best. I'll try to give a reaction on that launch. I'll also be live November 14th. It's on Saturday for the Crew 1 launch. Come hang out with us. We'll be doing our coverage there. We'll be talking that. Bring your questions. Come hang out. It's going to be a lot of fun. And a big thanks to the Scene Snobs for having me on their show, their second election night, just to talk about stuff. And that was a lot of fun. We, of course, talked about Dystopian Futures because that's what's been on my mind. But that was really cool meeting everybody there and talking with them. They're a lot of fun. So go check them out at thescenesnobs.com. Check that. You can find all their shows. I got to say, Mick's doing a great job over there building a network, and it's very cool to see his progress. So love you guys. Thanks for having me on. And that's it, folks. That's it. As always, let me know if you have any thoughts for the podcast, any things you'd like us to talk about, any people you'd like us to talk to. We're always open to that. And you can hit us up at Today in Space Pod on Instagram and Twitter. On TikTok at Today in Space, and our Facebook page, Today in Space Podcast. You can check us out there. You can email us at todayinspacepodcast@gmail.com, and our website, todayinspace.net. And as always, we're 3D printing here with our lab, AG 3D Printing. Obviously, you saw what we did with our Borg costume, and you can check out everything over at AG 3D Printing on Instagram. And if you have any 3D printing projects you want to do, any cosplay you want to make, any costumes, anything that you're looking for that could be 3D printed. If you're trying to bring any idea into reality, that's what we do here. And the profits help fund this podcast and help us do all these fun things. So I appreciate you. We will talk to you more in the future. Have a great week. Spread love and spread science. Live long and prosper. Be well. See you next time. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Many intergalactic greetings to you, my friends.